folks, I am here with a good friend of mine who I've actually known for quite a few years now in the AP Lane world, and that is Mandy Flis, but we're going to let her introduce herself. But before we do, I just want to give a huge shout out, like I normally do, to all of the Patreon supporters for the Garden of English, and you can see their names like, I don't know, here-ish, okay? Once again, we are always extremely grateful for what you contribute to us each month. On top of that, if you're interested in contributing to the Garden of English in that way, there are some cool perks for that, and you can check that out in the video that will show up right here. But now that we've got that out of the way, Mandy, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what we're going to do here today, because I think you've got a really good solution to an extremely common problem. So where are you from, how long you been teaching, and then let's get into business.
All right, so hi everyone, my name is Mandy Flis. I teach at Narragansett Regional High School, which is a small school in central Massachusetts. I have been teaching here for 18 years. I've been in the AP language world for about 6 years, and I'm here today to talk about ways that can help your students find evidence for argument.
Right, and you know, I think that that's a really common issue that many students have and many teachers also have. How do we get it into our classroom? I mean, we already do so much anyway, especially during a COVID year, which makes it even harder. And how do we still try to get this, get the opportunities in there for students to get involved with the world so that they can have evidence when they get argument prompts later on? So what has been the struggle with your kids for that?
So especially this year, my students talk a lot about how they just don't feel confident finding evidence that they can use for an argument prompt,
right,
especially when we're giving them the argument prompt on the fly, which we practice quite a bit in my class. You know, they'll walk in, they'll see an argument prompt for the first time, and they're like, I don't know what to write about. And they draw a blank.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've had to really work hard this year. I know as AP teachers, we always tell them, watch the news, download news apps, make sure you're staying up to date on popular culture, on current events, and that doesn't always register with them.
Right.
So,
you know, interestingly enough, though, one thing that I did do in the past that actually works pretty well, not as well as what you're going to show us in just a minute, but is the flip side, because that will send you one email about one issue in the morning, and it gives you both the right wing and the left wing sources, and it says, here's what's actually going on, and here's how each actual media piece actually presents about it. And then it puts them next to each other so you can kind of see that bias there, so you can teach bias too. But nonetheless, if kids aren't going to read their emails because we get inundated, especially during a COVID year, it's going to become even more problematic. But it does only give them one news item to remember per day, I guess. But you've got something way better. So why don't you tell us what's going on, where did it come from, and how do we do it?
All right, so I have to give a huge shout out first to Mary Jo Zell, because this is a lesson that I adapted from her. I had an APSI with her my first year teaching AP Lang, and a lot of her materials were super helpful.
I mean, Mary Jo Zell really is like one of the who's who here, so huge shout out to her for sure.
So I have to say that a lot of this comes from her. I just adapted it to work for my students and for my classroom. So we call this article of the week, which my students kind of laugh about because we actually do it every other Friday. So it's really article of every other week. So every other Friday, they are responsible for finding a current news source. It has to be current. It has to have a date published of that week that they pass it in. So, you know, they can't find all the sources at once in one term or one semester.
Yeah.
That way they're staying up to date on current events. They need to try to find a variety of sources. So, you know, 1 week could be education. They could talk about politics, gender, sports, entertainment. And that kind of takes away from that kid that always wants to write about sports or always wants to talk about politics. They're kind of forced to look at other sources. So
now, do you give them those categories, or do you just say you have to kind of manage that yourself?
I do give them the categories. Yep. And I tell them that I will check, but honestly, I don't always check, and they're really good about it. And they'll even say, I did education already, but I really love this article. Do you mind if I do it again? So they're actually better about keeping up with it than I am.
So you just got that recorded, just so you know. So if any of your students watch it, they'll be like, oh, I can do Sports Illustrated every week now. We're good.
So once they do that, they need to annotate the article. I ask them to annotate very objectively. Mostly because in the beginning of teaching annotation, I always notice that they want to talk about it in a way that's more personal, you know, like, oh, I can relate. I totally understand. I feel the same way. And those aren't annotations that we can really use.
Right.
So I tell them you need to do so objectively. You need to annotate for the rhetorical situation. As you get better at it, if you want to put more person into it, that's fine. But
Right.
in the beginning, I want it strictly objective. So that's something they have to stick with.
Well, that's super cool too, because I mean, honestly, they're now practicing elements of rhetorical analysis as you're preparing them to actually have evidence for arguments. So we're double dipping here,
Yeah.
and that's going to come out excellent.
Yeah. In a normal year, I'd have them print out the article,
Yep.
annotate it, and then do the next step and pass that in. But this year we went full digital. So I do have this example here of this student. So they copy and pasted the article into a document, and then they did the annotations this way.
Yeah.
So you can see that she annotated for the title. She mentions the exigence. She talks about like the logical appeal. She obviously points out the authors, the publication date. She
Yep.
mentions imagery. She talks about switch from in-person to online. So she's kind of engaging with the article, as you said, in a
Yeah.
more rhetorical way. So, and you can see her annotations here as she goes
And
through.
they just go through as Google comments on that for the digital
They
format of
do.
this.
Yeah. In a normal year, we would do this, paper, pencil, and they would pass it in and I would check their annotations. But this is how we did it this year. The next step for that is, and again, this is depending on the classroom. I have them set it up. I want a citation. I think
Yep.
that's excellent practice for later on when they're in college. And then I have them write a précis on the
Yeah.
article. So you can see here that's sort of what she did, addressing all the main rhetorical points in the article. And she's also incorporating quotes into her paragraph.
Right. And also, having them write that and prepare that way is important because some people actually use that as the thesis, teach their kids to use that as a thesis for the rhetorical analysis. And that's totally a functional way to do so for the rhetorical analysis essay. So if kids are consistently practicing this, they're learning how to produce a thesis in particular, or even their full intro paragraph that can
Right.
get the thesis point for test day as well.
Right. And a lot of the students have said that moving along in this process, they've said, wow, I feel like I've just written a really good introduction paragraph.
Yeah.
And then they could kind of move on with this article. So absolutely a good practice. So you can see this is just an example here of, what she would do, writing that rhetorical précis.
Mhm.
And another thing, if as they're doing different articles every other week, they're becoming more knowledgeable about the world around them, and they're building a strong foundation that will later allow them to talk about the impacts they're facing nationally or globally, which
Right.
will help them with the argument prompt.
Yeah. And so pulling that through there. Now, do you ever have the kids present these or anything like that? Or is it like, no, I'm just holding you individually accountable for A, B, C, and D throughout the year?
That's a great question because this year we didn't really have the time
Yeah.
to present them. So in a normal year, and again, we were short on time on learning this year, working in the hybrid model. In a normal year, I might ask them, who wants to share what they wrote about, or I might personally say, I really liked this article so-and-so picked. I think we should go over it.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I would suggest that for teachers because you're getting the whole class in on it.
Right. And then it becomes a collective kind of movement there too. And then, I picture just doing it in my classroom. I picture more so doing it next year because I'm like, well, I'm already well into my school year and whatnot, but I could probably bring it in. But I've got my next few weeks already planned out where I want to be, But I'm like, oh my word, this is great because I can have them share their article. Here, it's Friday, take 15 minutes, hear about 3 other articles, go through, and then move on, and then, what an easy community builder even, right? And then the kids find out what other kids are interested in. Some kids
Right.
might have chosen the same articles or similar articles, but with different perspectives. I mean, we could have great conversations here.
Yeah, I think that's been my favorite part is some of them will choose the same subject, but different media
Yeah.
and have a totally different spin on it. So that's been something interesting to talk about.
Excellent. Now, do you have a write-up for this, or a write-up with steps for this, or anything that we can provide?
I do. So I have an assignment that I provide to the students with a rubric that I can share with you. That you
Awesome.
can add to the comments. And again, I just adapted it from an assignment from Mary Jo.
Yep.
I'm willing to share it. Also, just to add like how this can be more helpful towards the end of the year, maybe around like April.
Yeah.
I like to take these out in a normal year. We would have it in a folder. This year they're digital, but I like to take the articles out and then kind of post around different argument prompts and now say like match those news articles to the different prompts and see if they'll work with these different prompts that you have in front of you. And then the kids are like, oh wow, they're just totally like, now I get it.
Right, and they probably work with most of them, and that works out even better. Yeah, no, this is a great assignment that I think gets kids engaged, but also it doesn't require too much. Read an article over 2 weeks, write 4 sentences that are rhetorical in nature, annotate the article as you read it, and these are things that you can even do in class, or if you've got 5 minutes of downtime here or there. I just don't feel like this is a taxing assignment that can get kids a wealth of knowledge. And when you told me about it, I was like, oh my gosh, let's do a video because this sounds great.
Yeah, it's been great. It really does help the students. We just did the prompt on safety versus freedom.
Yeah.
Talk about a really relevant prompt. A lot of them were like, oh my God, masks, COVID, restrictions. So, and a lot of that they got from doing Article of the Week.
Yeah. No, this is great, Mandy. I really appreciate you taking some time and even just going over it with me and sharing some examples here. Once again, we'll actually put a description of these things, of how to do these in the comments down below. Once again, a huge thank you to Mary Jo Zell because she's just pretty much one of the most awesome people ever. Let's be real, right? And that is that. So also, if this video was helpful, we're going to always ask that you press like and subscribe because that's probably the easiest way that you can help out me here at the Garden of English. We also have a bunch of affiliate links down below that can help teachers in particular with stuff that they want in their classroom, whether it be learning management interfaces like Parlay or AP Lang review books and AP Lang textbooks like the one that we wrote that I co-authored with AMSCO and Perfection for AP Lang. All of those things are linked right down below. Please also know that Mandy asked that I didn't share this, but I'm going to. She has a Teachers Pay Teachers store, so you might want to check her out. Does it have a title, by the way, or is it just like Teachers Pay Teachers, Mandy Flis?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So Mandy has that, and I want to make sure that she gets a shout out because she totally does awesome work. She's really well respected in the AP community, especially up here in Massachusetts.
Thank you.
And it's just been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a great day.